Hello and welcome to the Small Business Briefing, the Monday edition. And I am Brian Calley, the CEO of the Small Business Association of Michigan.
Hello, everyone. Alexa Kramer, the Director of Government Operations at SBAM.
All right, so as you can see, Alexa is co-hosting with me today as Sarah is unavailable, but we've got some politics to talk about and some other government relations work. So it's actually the perfect time for Alexa to plug in and be a part of the show. Before we get to that, though, I want to recognize our sponsor, which is Marana Group, Data Document and Distribution Solutions Company. We actually use SBAM for many years. Has used Marana Group. If you really receive something in the mail from us, 9 times out of the 10, they're the ones that actually handled it. Just do an amazing job and a whole suite of different solutions to data document distribution issues, problems, and opportunities. So highly recommend them. And they're the original sponsor of the Small Business Briefing. So Alexa, let's start with our talent shortage problems that we're continuously working on. It's been over the last many years. It's been the top one or two issues that have been identified from our members. And there's some good programming at the state, but some of them are really more geared toward bigger businesses. And we've taken on this over this last year, an effort to get some of those changed, and Going Pro in particular, some of those programs changed to make them more accessible to small businesses. And so you've led the charge on that. And there's been some progress made lately.
Yeah, so for those that are not familiar with the Going Pro Talent Fund and what it is, this fund has been around for about a decade now. It's one of those proven talent programs that we've always relied on, something that employers love, employees love, the legislature loves. It's really a win-win for everyone. And so the way that it goes is we have a pot of money here at the state. Businesses that are needing to upskill their workforce can go to the Going Pro Talent Fund and use these dollars. Businesses would work with their Michigan Works agency that they're in their region to fill out an application process. So it's a competitive grant, and they would need to demonstrate the need that they have and the training that is needed for their current business. And so with that application process and those training dollars that would come in, that training needs to end in some sort of certificate or credential that's recognizable within their industry. So again, from the employer side, they're meeting real-time demand from saying that they have a worker, they have this open position, they just need someone with the right skills to fill that work. They're able to do that through the Going Pro Talent Fund. Employees love it because again, they're gaining new skills. And we know that especially in today's environment, employees are looking for those that are investing in them. And so it's a really great tool for employers to show that they are investing in their employees to get them the resources and the support that they need. So because this program has been around for quite some time, it's always good to, although it's a really popular program, to continue to look at what are ways that we can really make it a better program. And again, from our perspective, make it better for our small businesses. And so what we were able to do is I participated in several work groups with the Department of Labor and Economic Opportunity, where this fund kind of sits. And then we were also able to send some SBAM members that have received this funding and have gone through the application process to sit down in a focus group to say, okay, what works, what doesn't, what are we missing? And so we just got some results back of what that several months of work has concluded to. And so just wanted to hit on some highlights, things that I think are really exciting for our small businesses across the state. So first and foremost, we are coming up with a streamlined application process. Over the years, it has become increasingly more cumbersome. I think anyone who has gone through the process would agree with me that just there seems to be more and more questions each year. So what they are able to do is look at those questions and say, okay, what do we really need to ask? What are unnecessary questions? And kind of start to get rid of some of those unnecessary questions to really get at what are the key functions, those key questions that we're asking our employers in order to receive those funds. So that's the first portion. The second is also increasing the training amount. So there was a set cap of what training dollars those employers could receive. So for training of a new or an incumbent worker, it used to be up to $1,500 per employee. That was increased to $2,000 per employee. Same thing with apprenticeships, that was capped at $3,000. That is now $3,500. So again, we're seeing some increases on just the dollars that employers are able to receive, again, going towards that training. They're also doing some cleanup things that I would consider, things like support documents, manuals, guidances that are on the website, really cleaning those up, making those more user-friendly. As far as the website that actually houses the application, making that more functional for those employers to fill out the application process. They're also capping the amount given to each business at $500,000 per individual employer. So again, that allows more funds to go to more of our businesses. And then probably the most exciting, at least what I'm most excited about, is that they're introducing multiple rounds of applications. So instead of the one application per year, there's going to be 2 applications per year. Just allows folks to continuously look at what their needs are and again, go for those funds. You'll only be able to receive 1 award per year, but you have more than 1 chance to take that opportunity. So I think that that's going to help ease a lot of the training burden that we see across the state. So a lot of good things to come of this very, several months of work with the department, but it was great to work with them and was really proud to be able to represent SBAM at the table and then also get some SBAM members to participate.
Yeah, so I want to make sure that point isn't lost on it, that everything that we do is informed by and driven by the needs, insight, and participation from our members. And in this case, there was an opportunity for some actual small businesses who had experience with the Going Pro Talent Fund to engage directly with you and the department on how to make it better, provide real user insight, and have that guide the changes that get made. Now we've been so impressed with the level of difference that our members make when they're able to engage in the process in a lot of different ways. Could be like what you're talking about here, dealing directly with the department, could be testifying in committee, could be talking to the media about issues important to small business, and putting real color, meaning, purpose behind the small business advocacy message. And so we've started something new that we wanted to make available to our membership, and it's called Small Business Advocacy Champions. And just introduced this late last week, but thought this would be a good opportunity, since this is a good example of the sort of thing that we would that these advocacy champions would be involved in. Tell us about that program, what we can expect going forward.
Yeah, so very excited about this brand new member benefit that we are rolling out. And like Brian said, just late last week. So you can find it on our website. We'll go ahead and drop the link into the website that will kind of go through the 5 main buckets that we want to cover. The first being really advocacy, and Brian mentioned it. How do you testify in front of a legislative committee? How do you communicate with legislators? We want to equip our members to be able to use their own voice, because no one tells your story better than you. So that will be kind of the first bucket. The second bucket, Brian touched on media training, whether that's TV interviews, radio interviews. Some folks are really great talking to legislators, but stick a camera in front of their face and they go blank. And so we want to give them those tools in order to be a well-rounded SBAM advocacy champion. Another bucket, again, boards and commissions, something that there is a continuous need for folks on statewide boards and commissions that the governor is routinely appointing. So making those opportunities known, and also allowing our members to plug into boards and commissions that make the most sense for them. And then a candidate school, kind of part 1 and part 2. Part 1 focused on maybe you're not yourself ready to run for an elected office, but you're really interested in campaigns. You want to help other small business owners achieve elected office, right? So learning how to get involved in your local party, door knocking, how to make phone calls, all things campaign related. The second portion of candidate school would be, actually, I myself am wanting to run. And so we would kind of do a running for office candidate school, what it takes to run, how to balance your business with elected office, how to establish your campaign, all of that good stuff. And so those are the 5 main buckets. Like I said, Andrea was going to drop in the link to visit it out, but we really want to just get this in front of our members, see if you're interested. And right now we're going through kind of that exploratory phase, getting some input from our members of which bucket they're most interested in. So if you say that yes, you're interested, please, you will be getting outreach from us within the next few weeks on it. So we're very excited for this brand new member benefit.
And if you already involved with us on these sorts of things, I'd still ask you to still kind of, it's an opt-in thing. And while this is a benefit of membership, it's also, but there's no additional charge for it. So there's to really be engaged in what I think will be very top level advice, training, and practice in getting involved in the system and making a difference in how it works. To literally work alongside Alexa and I, and Kelly Saunders and Scott Lyons sometimes on healthcare issues. We've got several people here at SBM that do this, but to work right alongside us in doing it, and it'll make us more effective when we have actual small business owners that are a part of the advocacy work. So even if you're already involved in this, if you're somebody we already leaned on for media interviews and you already serve on a board or commission, please do follow the link and kind of opt in, if you will. And then you'll be a part of this network that we draw from to both to get you ready for whatever you're interested in, whether it's serving on a board or commission or volunteering on a campaign. If you don't have to do all of these things, it's just you might zero in on just something that you're interested in. And I promise you it'll be worth it. I can't point to the place on your balance sheet or your income statement where it will improve because you engage in the system and know how it works. But one thing that I have known, one thing that I have seen over my time on either side of the line here in politics is that those who do know the people that run the system and how the system works, it's good for your business. It's good to know these things, how the levers work and how to influence them. So please do consider getting involved as an SBM advocacy champion, and we'd be proud to have you.
And just know if you do opt in, I'm pretty sure that you will make Kelly Saunders on our team's whole day. So with that, Brian, a few things that we wanted to touch on. The first and foremost being we have some new unemployment numbers. Give us the inside scoop on those. Yeah,
pretty good unemployment numbers that came out last week. So the national numbers come out and then the state numbers come out after that. So there's state numbers that came out, and the overall unemployment rate had ticked down just a little bit from 4.3% to 4.2%. Now it's still quite a bit above the national average, but it indicates that while things are level and steady, and we've seen successive quarters of contracting GDP, that employment is holding steady, and so just an indication that oh, and by the way, there wasn't a big exodus of people from the workforce like we've seen in previous months. Sometimes the unemployment rate goes down, but there was a big exodus of people from the workforce, and that's not a good reason for it to go down. That wasn't the case here. So I saw it as very steady and level, and maybe an indication that at least so far, even though we're in kind of either recessionary or high risk of recessionary period, that employment looks very stable for the time being. Oh, it looks like you're muted there.
Sorry there, Brian. So next question, the Michigan Retailers Association recently put out their July monthly retail index survey. What are some takeaways from that survey?
Yeah, we did see some improvement in the retail index. So it was at, and this is something that is done monthly, put out monthly by the Michigan Retailers Association, came in at 54.3. That was an increase compared to June when it was 50.7. And one of the things that I find most interesting about this index that they put out is those who, they tell you the proportion, you know, obviously some are up and some are down. 59% of Michigan retailers saw an increase over June in July. And then 59% saw an increase and 35% reported a decrease and 6% at no change. So I think that's a pretty good indication, because when we get to data Monday, we're going to look at one of the things we're going to look at is retail inventories, which are on the climb, which would signal maybe there's a softening coming up. But more retailers in Michigan, at least for the time being, are seeing they've seen a strong July as compared to June.
So we saw Ford announce some recent layoffs. They just confirmed a good chunk of layoffs, kind of worldwide. Not sure how many are going to be, in our backyard, but tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah, this, of course, automotive has been in the news quite a lot lately, as there's been the big incentives for where battery plants are being located, new production plants are located. There's been a Ford announcement here, the big one was down south for Kentucky and Tennessee, but those are production level. What Ford's talking about now are white collar jobs. And so company-wide, they're going to be eliminating 3,000. This was leaked out in the media a few weeks ago, and Ford basically confirmed that there was something to it, but they didn't release the details. But details now coming out today. And while it's not broken out by how many are in what state, the fact that the headquarters is here in Michigan would say, and it's white collar jobs, would suggest that some of the brunt of this will be felt here. A lot of pressure in this business, cost pressures that have been mounting. So not particularly surprising that they're looking at ways to decrease cost and trying to, especially if we end up facing some recessionary periods over the next year or so. Not a foregone conclusion that the current contraction in the GDP will continue, but certainly possible. And we actually see plenty of evidence of especially bigger companies that are starting to play it a little more conservative when it comes to taking risks, and Ford taking a step like this. Pretty good indication that they expect further cost pressures and maybe an indication of a softening market.
So I want to pivot into more of the political portion of our small business briefing. I know that we've talked about some of the ballot questions in previous briefings. We saw one got certified, numbered 22-1, and it is a term limit reform ballot question. This is something that SBAM created a task force on and has decided to support with our board's approval. So why don't you give us a little refresher on term limits?
Yeah, I think we covered previously that there are so far 5 potential ballot questions that will make the ballot. Every time one of them does, we'll let you know here on the briefing. The one that I think was the most sure is the one that the legislature voted to put on the ballot. They went through a process of determining the exact language that would be on the ballot that you'll be voting yes or no on, and they named it 22-1. So proposal 22-1 is on the ballot, guaranteed. It's the only one that's guaranteed at this point. There probably will be more. Basically, what this proposal does is it changes Michigan's term limits law, which is in the Constitution. So this is a modification to the Michigan's Constitution that instead of putting term limits on state reps and state senators separately, where it's up to 6 years in the House and up to 8 years in the Senate, it combines them together and says that somebody could serve 12 years in either chamber total. So you could serve all 12 in the House, you could serve all 12 in the Senate, or you could break it up between the two, but it could never be more than 12 months. Or 12 years, I'm sorry. And then the the other thing that it does, it adds in financial disclosure requirements. And these aren't terribly specific in terms of exactly what type of financial disclosure, but Michigan is one of those states that does not require that candidates for office disclose anything about their finances, not their net worth, not their sources of income. Now, when I ran for governor a few years ago, I voluntarily disclosed my tax return, which is pretty common among gubernatorial candidates to do, or at least it used to be. But that's voluntary. This would take financial disclosure, and while it's not necessarily the tax return, it would take financial disclosure and make it mandatory. So those are the two main things: changing the way term limits work, adding in financial disclosure for candidates for state office, and it will be on the ballot. And there will be committees. There already have been committees formed for this change and against this change. So the one against the change is kind of being led by one of the people that was involved in passing term limits in the first place. There's a pretty broad coalition that's working to get it changed, including SBAM. Just looking at the ability to for people in the House of Representatives in particular to develop a certain amount, to spend more time in the House, even if at the expense of time in the Senate. And probably end up with more steady level experienced leadership on both sides of the chamber, as opposed to this churning, which has created quite a bit of instability, and with instability comes unpredictability. Of course, we like predictability when it comes to the business climate.
We saw the Republican candidate for Governor Tudor Dixon announced her running mate. Give us a little bit on that, Brian.
Yeah, so I know something about being selected as a running mate. Been through that myself back in 2010. In fact, it was kind of nostalgic. I remember I was scooping ice cream at the St. John's Mint Festival as a member of the legislature when Rick Snyder called me in the summer of 2010. It seems like a million years ago now, but so on the Democratic side of the ticket, of course, it was a foregone conclusion. Gretchen Whitmer already has a lieutenant governor, Garland Gilchrist. They just had their convention. Their slate is all set, and moving forward, all the same people that are currently in office in all the statewide offices, including the lieutenant governor. On the Republican side of the ticket, however, where there's a new nominee, so Tudor Dixon, who just won the primary, needed to select and submit to the Republican Party for their convention to consider approval a lieutenant governor candidate, and she has nominated Shane Hernandez. Now, Shane Hernandez was a member of the House of Representatives, and then served on the Speaker of the House's staff after that, and served at a very high key position. He was chairman of appropriations. He's from Southeast Michigan, St. Clair County, and served on the Appropriations Committee. So it's kind of widely seen as a really solid pick by Tudor Dixon, in that she's from West Michigan. This is somebody from Southeast Michigan, and but also somebody with some legislative experience and some legislative chops that has been through the process. So now that position has to be approved. That nomination has to be approved by the Republican convention. And now these days, you never know. When I was running for my renomination in 2014, and on the convention floor, there was a challenge. There was somebody who ran against me as Rick Snyder's choice for his running mate. That could happen again. In politics these days, that anything's possible. So, but at this point, Dixon has nominated Shane Hernandez, and he'll be before the convention, and that convention will be this weekend. So the kind of the ratification, if you will, of the ticket will happen at that point, and then off to the races. It's a pretty short window between now and election day, so expect the volume level to be pretty loud on these races moving forward.
And last but certainly not least, we have Data Monday. Brian, what do you have for us?
All right, so let's take a look. I've just got a handful of slides here, but pretty interesting and timely. The first thing I wanted to point to is the Chicago Fed Activity Index. So this is dozens, about 85 different points of data on the on economic activity, and about 2 to 1 were positive in this last in this last period. So what was notable is not that it came in at 0.27, because that's it's modestly positive, nothing to write home about, but it was actually projected to be negative this month. And so the fact that it came in positive was an indication, and about 2 to 1 of the factors that go into this index were positive versus negative. And so just an indication that while there's been softening of the economy, and we're coming out of a period where we saw economic activity dip, no promises for the future, but again, another just little data point that would indicate to me that that it's hopefully won't be a deep or a long recession if we face one moving forward at all. And then when it comes to I want to talk about a couple of workforce things. The personal consumption expenditure for back to work related services. There are so many interesting ways to look at rising costs, and there's a lot of companies are looking at having people come back to the office for their work. You can see here that that generally there's increasing costs associated with that. So transportation being the one that has risen the most, naturally, with gas prices and the cost of vehicles increasing, but also things like food services. When people are going into the office, more likely to use food services, so those costs being up. And then childcare, you see on here as well, as one that's trending upward. So we actually got another slide here, which looks at the PricewaterhouseCoopers survey. And this I thought was super interesting, because it's all over the map in terms of what employers are doing in terms of their workforce right now. So we do see, number one, not surprised by this, because our own surveying of our members show the same, that that the 2 top strategies for talent right now are expanding remote work options and increasing compensation. So those are the 2, and on our small business surveys, it shows the top 2 as well. So but changing processes to address labor shortages has really risen up here, and I wanted to expound on that a little bit. What that's talking about is changing the way things are being done so that you can do more with less. In other words, increasing the productivity, because there just aren't enough people to fill all the positions. Expanding mental health benefits is another area. 62% that are expanding mental health benefits. You might recall a few weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I showed where the overall in America, the prescriptions for mental health medicines are way up compared to what they were in pre-pandemic times. And so employers that need to have a happy workforce, a functional workforce, a healthy workforce, expanding mental health benefits is becoming, actually kind of surprised at how common that was. I'm hearing plenty of anecdotes out there, but for 62% to be doing that, pretty impressive. But we're also seeing some moves to protect business out there. Hiring freezes, literally reducing overall headcount. And also look at this one, about half of businesses out there are encouraging employees who left to rejoin. So there was the Great Resignation, and then the Great Regret, and a new strategy employers are using is to find out, was the grass really greener on the other side? And so lots of different things happening out there in the workforce, and we hear about all of these things with small businesses as well. So this also is another pretty good indication. Last week we showed where the unit cost for labor was still going up, and so that was an indication that there's still upward pressure on on inflation. But but now there are a lot of consecutive days here, almost 67 consecutive days of average declines in U.S. gasoline price. So still high, but not as high, and consistent downward movement in terms of the overall cost of gasoline. So I think that's going to be a counterbalance, on some of the risks that we face, especially as it comes to longer term recessionary concerns that sustained long-term high energy costs are one of those things that can really put a dampening on the economy, on the U.S. and the global economy. Their energy prices are still too high, but definitely trending in the right direction. And then on the last slide here is an indication on supply chain, and this is just looking at the benchmark for container costs for the 40-foot boxes coming overseas across the Pacific Ocean. And as you see that there's a nice downward trend here. Still high, still too high. If you look especially back to this pre-pandemic period, still very, very high, but steadily coming off the highs that we experienced in the past, and therefore an indication that supply chains are also healing. So if we look at all of those things, we see kind of mixed messages in the labor market. We see some indication that supply chains are healing and getting stronger, and then we also see we see some upward pressure on wages, and therefore that will put upward pressure on inflation. We see energy costs consistently inching their way down, which might counteract some of that. So again, just like last week, mixed messages, but mixed messages are better than all looking down, which is where we were just a few months ago.
Well, that's all the time that we have for today. So thank you everyone for joining, and hope you have a great rest of your day.
Thanks everybody. See you next week.